This is the Troutbitten podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
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 Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout.
Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten podcast, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Dominic Swintowski, the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. The allure of night fishing arises from a mystery. We pursue unknowable things into the darkness and sort through the unpredictable behaviors of trout to catch them after the sun goes down. There are no experts in the night game, and that itself is what secures the puzzle, a simple lack of information. There is no treasure map after dark. In large part, we fish because of what might happen. While night fishing, we begin to realize that anything can happen. The best night anglers harbor a deep humility that black water and shadowed trout have forced upon them. Night fishing is full of failure, and any effort to spin it otherwise is foolish and transparent. Most often, it takes an angler who cares more about the journey, about discovery and learning than tangible results. Because night fishing beats down even the most ambitious among us. The empty net grinds on you. The bleak loneliness takes a toll. It's the anticipation, the anxiety. You're left exhausted from constantly pushing a natural fear of the dark to the back of your mind. The late hours and early mornings make you feel thin because the rest of your life doesn't wait for you to catch up. Night fishing trips are the only time I drink coffee after 9 o'clock p.m. The truth is, there are so few dedicated night anglers out there that good first-hand information is scarce. Second-hand information and hearsay, however, is rampant. Mousing, big black streamers, new moon, low water, and the tailouts, these are the often repeated expressions and tactics that are supposed to work. But do they? Well, sure, sometimes. Night fishing for trout is accompanied by legend. Tall tales are easily masked in shadow, and the truth is dimmed once the sun sets over the horizon. Some say night fishers are a secretive bunch, accounting that for the lack of good information. I argue that the dearth of usable information is a simple result of no one else being out there. And those of us who do night fish frequently are skunked often enough to keep us shrugging our shoulders. So what I just read there are the introductory paragraphs for the Night Fishing for Trout series on Troutbitten. It's an article titled People, Places, and Things. And it's the first installment in an ongoing series covering some of what I've learned about trout after dark. But I'm careful with that word learned there. Sure, I've come a long way in the 15 years or so that I've spent night fishing. And time on the water has taught me things both by fishing the net and through repeated failure. I've gone through periods of time where I dedicated a few years to night fishing as my primary motivation. Fishing after dark at least once a week, even through the winter months. And spending a lot more than that under the dark summer sky. What I've learned is often very different than the stuff that's supposed to work. And then again, some of it matches up pretty well. And then after over a decade of night fishing as a solitary endeavor, I met my friends Josh and Trevor, who are here with me tonight. These guys somehow found that same rare drive to search and discover after dark. And it's more than just a passing fad for them, too. They've dug deeper into the shadows than anyone else that I've met. And I learn from them. They are my trusted fishing friends. Their experience becomes my own. Their reports, their observations are nearly as valuable as having my own boots in the water. These guys night fish, and they fish hard. And tonight, the goal is to provide an overview, just some kind of path down that lonely, dark, but wonderfully mysterious road that is night fishing. So, here's Josh Darling. Josh owns Wilds Media, and he's the man behind the Troutbitten YouTube videos that we've been putting together. I'm glad to be working with Josh and glad to call him a night fishing friend. How you doing, Josh?
Real good, Dom.
Yeah? You ready for some night fishing exploration?
Yeah, I always learn something when we all talk here like this.
Well, now you have to tell everybody everything you know.
That's right. Got to share all the secrets here.
It's okay, because we can reveal all the secrets and nobody's going to put them to use anyway, because almost nobody goes out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know if there are secrets. All right, so here's Trevor Smith. Trevor is a physician and probably the smartest person I know. I just wanted to give you that. I think it's true. Say clever things once in a while. Now, Trevor's full of good ideas on the river, and he has the drive to follow through with them. Trevor, what's going on, man?
I'm good. I'm in summer mode. Every night is a night to catch up on sleep for the next night out.
That's the thing, right? Like you guys do. What's your kind of start of night fishing season where you really get after it?
Probably June.
End of May, beginning of June.
Mm-hmm. We're trying to push the boundaries on both ends as much as we can and try to learn more and more. But
when you guys said that you were going to fish through the winter, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Somebody else, again, like more data. I was definitely excited about that. And you asked me how it was, and I almost hated to say like, it's really slow in the winter. Yeah. But, I didn't want to discourage it. And
sure,
I think that's what we all love is the idea that there is something to figure out. I do think there's something to figure out.
Yeah.
There's something they're eating. I still think they're eating in the winter.
They have to eat. Yeah.
And we catch the occasional trout in the winter, right? But boy, not like it is here in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been kind of getting after it for a few weeks now, right, guys?
Yeah.
Kind of jumping back into the same schedule as last summer, essentially.
I know your schedule too.
Yeah. I think everybody else does, because I think on our last, when we talked about the mouse emerger concept, our only other night fishing podcast, we mentioned that we've been fishing on Thursday nights. Yeah. We even Trevor and I both got a message this week from a guy who was out on Thursday night and knew that that Trevor and I fish on Thursday nights in the summer. He was like, hey, was that you guys? And we're like, nope, it wasn't. Wish it was. But
oh yeah, I wish it was me too. It's really difficult for me to guide and then night fish, that day and then
that's
guide
hard
the
to
next
turn
day.
around.
Yeah, but whatever. I'll get back to it. My guide season is over soon for the spring summer season. Yeah, I'm good. I'll be out there soon.
Trevor's off to a hot start. He's 2 whiskeys in. Yeah.
Yeah.
20 inchers. That's a whiskey. That's the Troutbitten term for 20 incher.
I think it's luck of the draw to some extent.
Good pictures too.
Yeah, good pictures.
Although, is that a humble brag?
Well, no. I don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that might be tongue in cheek too, because I can't hold a fish right now. I remember this happening our first night season.
Yeah.
That I just struggled holding these bigger fish or doing it naturally. And
because they're active, you mean? They want to jump out of your hands?
Yeah, and I think they're active, and I don't know.
Yeah,
they're spunky, and then maybe that's it. Well, let's blame it on that. That's great.
That's it. It's gotta
that gives me a good out.
Yeah. Well, you had a weird one too. That last one that you caught was a real big female, and she had a full stomach, and it was actually really difficult to balance.
Very crayfish.
Honestly difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be surprised if she had an entire crayfish. It was hard, so there was definitely a crayfish or a small turtle or something.
Wow. Never thought of that.
But she was loaded with something.
Well, you said spunky. Yeah, plenty of the night fish that I land, we land them fast. We might talk about that.
Yeah.
We try to get them in real fast, or else crazy things happen. And we're using much heavier tippet and all that. We don't even call it tippet. Anyway, they're in the net, bam, and they're kind of surprised, and we're kind of surprised. And if you're trying to take a picture, sometimes
They've got some energy left, which is good.
But, yeah, absolutely. And we fight them fast during the day, but we're talking about really fast.
Real fast, yeah.
We'll get into that with the line that we're using.
Yeah, right on. So maybe we should move right into it, guys. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's do it. An introduction to night fishing for trout. In the beginning of this podcast episode here, I mentioned the Night Fishing for Trout series on the Troutbitten website. Combine that dedicated series with the other articles I've written on the subject, and there are 30 to 40 somewhere in there, night fishing pieces for you to read. There is also a full podcast on the mouse emerger concept from season 1. It was episode 3, and Josh and Trevor and I had a good time detailing one of our most productive tactics for catching big trout at night. The point is, this podcast will add to that bank of knowledge. We will add to that resource. I don't do much intro level stuff on Troutbitten because I feel like that's been done, perhaps overdone, everywhere else. And Troutbitten is about going further, fishing harder, and wanting more. But the night game cupboard is practically bare, right? The encyclopedia of knowledge out there is hardly past the first volume, really, because so few people night fish, and even fewer share good information about it. I think it's fair to start with a podcast episode like this one. So for the next hour or so, we'll run through some of the most important details about night fishing for trout. This is meant to be a primer. This is not in depth, really. Again, though, the deep supporting articles are there for you on the Troutbitten website. And in future seasons of this Troutbitten podcast, I'm sure we'll do a tactical series of many episodes long that breaks each of these components down into finer detail. Definitely looking forward to that. So tonight, we'll broadly cover the topics of motivation, places and planning, moonlight, starlight, and city light, headlights, flashlights, and glow-in-the-dark stuff, the tactics of drifting and swinging, water types, fly types, big trout and finding the right locations, fighting fear, which is a good one, accepting the mystery, and then the rods and the lines. I think we'll kind of run down through these pretty quickly because this can't be a 4-hour-long podcast, right?
Right.
So that's our challenge. You think we can do it?
I do.
I do.
And I like the breadth of coverage. I think even if it is not in depth on every point, I think it's an important set of things to go over.
Yeah. And I know that when I started night fishing, if I could have heard something like I think we'll do right here, I'd have been pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I'd have said, okay, there you go. I got some kind of path. Maybe I'll try this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So motivation, right? Start with that. Why do we night fish? Anybody?
I think the mystery you mentioned, I honestly love the intro you kind of read through there, because I think I've never read something that so well captures kind of some of the reasons why I night fish. But that mixture of fear and excitement and the unknown, and yet the possibility of something that's pretty special is part of it for me.
Right on. Same here.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think we talked about this in the last podcast, but maybe some people haven't heard that. And so a big part of it is just free time, man. We've talked about that a lot. It's time that you don't have to be spending on anything else. Like, you're not going to feel guilty because you're not working in the middle of the night. You might regret it the next morning when you don't have sleep, but that's a huge reason, especially with young kids. We all have kids. Mm-hmm. Nighttime's free. Yeah. As long as you can manage to get through it the next day.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And really, you guys have gone through it. Same thing with me. When I started having kids is when I really started to go, all right, I'm going to figure this out.
Yep.
Like you say, it's free time. And the only cost is being tired the next day. But when you're younger, you go, so what? You know?
Right.
And I can still say, so what? I don't care.
That's right.
I would bring this up. I don't necessarily night fish just because I want to catch big trout. Because, man, it's not easy. I think if big trout are your motivation, quite honestly, I think you have a better shot during the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
If
we logged as many hours in the day as we do at night, I think you're right. I think there's a chance you're right. I think that's a good point.
Yeah. To get to the point where you are catching bigger trout at night, it takes a long time. And the things we're going to talk about, all of the elements we're about to talk about kind of need to be in place. And you have to spend some time out there before I think you do start to catch anything of size consistently. But that said, catching big trout is part of my motivation. No doubt about it. When I first started night fishing, I was just trying to catch a fish. Literally, a fish. I didn't really care. I just wanted to learn something about being out there after dark and how you even go about this. Yeah. And then eventually I was able to take some of those things I was starting to learn over to where I did think there were bigger trout, but I might not catch many, but I thought that there were bigger trout. And then it took a long time to start to get into those bigger ones.
I think sharing an adventure with a buddy is also pretty fun for me. My personality lends itself well to that. And so the fact that for me and Josh both, it works so well to fish at night because of our families, it kind of naturally led into us enjoying that time together and, really allowing even for some more documentation of our nighttime fishing because of the ability to take photos with each other and then also to document like the conditions around our success at night and to talk them through with each other. I think that's been a really valuable piece of our fishing.
Yeah, I definitely think we flattened out the learning curve a little bit just because we had both fished at night before fishing with each other, probably a good bit, but we started making some pretty serious progress when we started fishing together because we were just doubling the information. And we would intentionally go out there and fish two separate, styles at a time. Until we found something, hey, this is working tonight. Try
with
this.
With your walkie-talkies.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
We do carry walkie-talkies.
yeah. And to this day, like,
Call it whatever you want.
Just kidding.
We keep radioing in with each other and almost making sure that we're doing something different. If we're not catching fish. But if we start catching fish, we'll zero in on it and usually double our success.
Catch so many fish.
So many. It's so easy.
It's so easy. Yeah.
I also have this just competitive side of me that I love knowing that I'm doing something that other people might not be willing to do.
Right.
To get to the next level in fishing. And so the whole night game is extremely appealing because I'm like, not very many people are going to be up right now and willing to not sleep at all for the sake of learning this.
And I like that challenge within myself. It's so easy, at 9 o'clock when you want to leave the house. It's so easy to go, I'll get to sleep now. And I'll go morning fishing. I'll get up at dawn. That's more in my regular routine. It's so easy to say that. It definitely takes an effort, and it's not even a competition necessarily with other people. It's kind of like you say, Josh. It's hard to do. So that's why I like it. And it is that mystery, like you said, Trevor.
Yeah.
That for me, I think, is the biggest deal. There are so many unanswered questions. I could live twice as long as I could ever live, and I'm not going to get close to figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I love that all of those answers are still wide open. There's just nobody really knows what's going on out there. Hardly anybody has any good information.
Yeah.
When you're talking about fishing with buddies, though, I mean, you are the only two that I know that have really found each other as good night fishing friends.
Mm-hmm.
And you know me, I'd rather fish by myself. That's kind of true. Even at night,
Sure.
I love that extra. There's something, we'll talk about the fear. There's something about being alone at night that just does it for me. But until I got to be friends with you guys, I never had those night fishing buddies. I definitely wanted to have them, and I tried to recruit some of them.
Sure.
Grobe wouldn't even night fish with me much when he was back here. But no, I think it's pretty rare. And I talk to a lot of people, while I'm guiding. We'll talk about night fishing because they've read some of the articles, and most people are interested. But I think most people certainly wish that they had somebody like you guys have that'll be on that same schedule, that really will commit to it and do it and not say, hey, I can't go tonight, week after week. Yeah.
I think it has helped that we're good friends outside of night fishing.
Yeah.
But I also think that in both of us, there is a drive to catch fish at night that keeps us hungry. Yeah. And maybe there's a bit of that competitiveness too. Mine's maybe a little bit different, or maybe I'm more self-competitive maybe. But I appreciate that Josh has that, because then as long as I keep catching more fish than him, I know he'll still go out with me. Because he wants to prove that he can catch more than I can, like he did last year.
See, you got a little stab in there.
That's good.
Yeah. But I know I have a night fishing buddy as long as I keep out fishing him.
I like it.
Right. You've backed it up this year.
Yeah.
So far, it's early.
So far, it is early.
It's basically preseason.
It's preseason. Yes.
Thank you, Dom.
Spring ball.
For over a decade, Smith Creek has provided innovative, high-quality angling solutions designed to put your gear in easy reach, free up your hands, and keep our waters clean. Smith Creek's award-winning rod clip attaches to your vest and grips a variety of rod sizes, freeing up your hands to tie a fly, change a hook, or release your catch. All Smith Creek products are built guide tough, using high-quality materials like anodized marine-grade aluminum and UV-resistant nylon. For a limited time, Troutbitten customers can save 10% off select Smith Creek products like rod clips, rod racks, and net holsters. Just visit the Smith Creek official store on Amazon.com and apply the discount code 10SmithCreek at checkout. That's the number 10, followed by Smith Creek. Hey, what about places? Do you just fish the same rivers as you do during the day? What's your advice, guys?
I think every single place that I would fish in the day is an opportunity to night fish. And I think it's more about the places within those places that maybe catch our eye in the daytime as a spot to revisit at night.
Nice.
So brown trout are nocturnal feeders. And so in any stream that we're catching brown trout in the daytime, there's an opportunity at night.
Now, you just brought up something that we probably should have mentioned even. What we are talking about is fishing mostly for brown trout. We're wading rivers. And none of these rivers around here and the places that we fish none of them are huge rivers. What are the top flows? Maybe 500-600 CFS, even when they're kind of high.
Yeah.
That's the kind of fishing we're talking about. And yes, we've done night floats and things like that. Sure, other species at times. We're talking about fishing browns in the small to medium or kind of large rivers.
Yeah.
I think that likely a lot of what we're talking about would carry over well. It's just a matter of knowing your river well enough to how you need to get around it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I love what you said there, Trevor, about seeing those places during the day. I'll be fishing and I go, ooh, that'd be a nice piece of night water.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And then so what I'll do, and I used to do this when I was really getting into night fishing, I'd be fishing in the day. And
Tell
I'd
me
say,
you take a picture.
Yeah, right? You do that, don't you?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we all do that then? Yeah. Tell me, Josh, what do you do?
No, yeah. So you're standing in the river. You're thinking, or I'm moving to another spot, and I pass a spot. I'm like, that right there, that's good night water, and I'll find a landmark that I know that I'll be able to find at night, big rock or something like that, so that I know where I was standing when I took that picture, and I'll just snap a shot of the bank, and so I know what that water in front of me looks like when I'm standing exactly in that spot.
Sure.
And then get a really good image of what it's going to look like.
What are you trying to capture in that picture?
I kind of just want to see the intricacies of the bank primarily.
Agreed.
I want to know, like, are there overhanging limbs here? I want to know, like, how far in the bank under that overlay. Because what happens at night is you get this wall of shadows, and that you get a pretty good idea of what it looks like, but depth gets really thrown off. And how far from this overhanging limb is the bank actually? Because a matter of 2 feet is a huge difference at night.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so if the bank is 4 feet past that overhanging limb and I'm only casting 2 feet past that overhang, that's a really big difference. And so having a good idea of depth, that's what I'm looking for at night with pictures usually.
Sure.
I just want to know what the bank looks like.
Yeah, because we're so often fishing structure, and a lot of it's that right on the bank. Man, if you can get 6 inches off the bank instead of 2 feet off the bank, that's the difference between success and failure a lot of times. And you just got to know it. You got to know it like the back of your hand. Or
what else do you look for in those pictures?
You said it. Those overhanging branches are probably my main things. And then, the depth of the water, the structure of the water. If there's a rock in there, if there's a piece of the undercut bank that kind of wherever that soft water is, and I want to know how wide that soft water is, or let's say how far out from the bank that soft water seam is, and how fast it is. I would say this, as I'm choosing places to night fish, I have to know them. I do not do destination trips, go out of state and go fishing and say, I'm going to night fish this too. I have tried it. I'm not comfortable enough. And I don't mean comfortable like I'm afraid of it. I'm saying I'm not comfortable enough to fish it well. I need to be around that structure to have success usually. So I got to get under branches, around rocks, and literally under those undercuts sometimes. And if I can't imagine it, I'm not comfortable. I can't fish it well. And then my results are always poor. I mean, always. And so that's why I take the pictures sometimes like you do.
Yeah. We've even at times, we've fished certain sections of rivers often enough when at times we've found ourselves wading up higher in the stream or, hiking up further than we thought we were. The disorientation of being even in a slightly different location when we begin can throw you off so much that you fish really ineffectively because you're just used to we probably have like pretty intricate maps in our minds now about certain stretches of river that we could feel out with our fly line, and we kind of we rely upon certain landmarks and certain feelings and like, okay, after this glide and tail out, then I know that this riffle's coming up and then it slides into this pool. And you can just it just feels like a piano piece that you can play front to back. But if somebody interrupts you in the middle of it, you'll forget it, So it's interesting how the memory works.
It is. And a lot of times it's things I'm feeling with my feet that tell me where I need to cast next.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things will change too. Obviously branches will become lower or trees will fall in. And if I haven't been there for a couple of weeks, sometimes I'm surprised by a new log jam or whatnot. And I'll say, we're going to talk about lights, I'm sure, here in a little bit. But sometimes we we keep our lights off. I don't know if people understand it, but we're keeping our lights off. We have a headlamp ready to turn it on when we absolutely need it for other things, relocation. But as we're fishing, we are not fishing with the light on. That won't work. But very occasionally, I do what I call a bank flash. You guys do it, I know. If I get disoriented, I will flash my headlamp on a piece that I need to cast into for less than a second. Flash it on, off, like on, off, like that. Just once, really. On, off, just so I can see, okay, there I am.
I've actually gotten in that. My personal way of doing that is I shine my light up in the sky and I lower my head until the bottom of the beam hits the edge of the bank, and then I turn it off. Sure. And so I've found a way that at least I think doesn't hit the water as much with direct light. And so it's, whether that's really effective or not, I don't know. What do you do, Josh?
We do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Dom, you told us about doing that before we ever were like, because I think I was like afraid that if I turn on the light, that screws up my success.
Sure.
I will not do it. And then
it
you
doesn't
were like,
help it.
Yeah. Well, and then you made that point. You're like, I don't think it makes a big difference. I do it. And so we started trying it, and I would do it like, maybe once per night. I would take the risk. And then, then at one point, a couple years ago, we fished together, and I saw how often you were willing to do it. And I'm like, well, he just caught a fish. So like it must not make that big of a difference.
Yeah. And if it's real fast, I don't think it makes that big of a difference.
But
like
your
I said,
mind
it doesn't
remembers
help
that image, real well.
And then you can fish. If I can't imagine it, and if I'm hitting branches in there, or if I'm not hitting branches at all, if I feel like, man, I'm not even close enough to the bank, well then, if I'm not catching fish anyway, like it's almost like, what's it going to hurt, know?
Yeah.
And
trade-off.
Yeah, it is a trade-off. At least I have that image now I can work on. And boy, I try to gather as much data as I can in that half second, and then it's in there. I got it. And I already know the area anyway, but maybe a new tree did fall in, or something's different about that water tonight, and I wasn't ready for it.
No, we've also seen, having fished so many nights, you see either a floodlight on a house flashes on and off, and it casts a beam across the water momentarily, a car driving around the bend with its high beams on, heat lightning, or even just actual lightning overhead. And so you see these examples of a flash of light and gone. And clearly the fish don't all spook and scatter every single time that happens. And so, but I do think they're probably very sensitive to, was that too long? Is that a prolonged beam of light,
Right on.
And do they then feel exposed versus, was that just a flash and it's gone?
For sure. That's it. So we're talking about light, and that kind of defines night fishing, right? Now everybody thinks of it as the absence of light, but boy, it's not. And we know that there are very, very few nights that I just can't see anything out there. I'm going to say I've been in true darkness, maybe only 2 or 3 nights. And those nights were uncomfortable because it was so hard to just pick up anything, any reference. You could look up and still couldn't see the silhouette of the big trees. It was just almost black out there. Those were interesting nights, and I did poorly. But those are rare. Boy, I've fished a lot of nights, and I've only ever encountered it a few times. So let's talk about moonlight, starlight, and what I call city light. What do you think? What are the differences? What's your favorite? What's your favorite, first off?
You kind of mentioned it as a rumor in the beginning that people assume that a new moon is the best, and I kind of actually do agree with that. I do really love a night where the moon really isn't present, but it's a clear sky. And so you get some starlight. So you get sort of a dim light. I like that a lot.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. New moon, obviously, is no moon, right?
Yeah.
I actually have had plenty of people tell me like, oh, it's full moon. Aren't you going night fishing? No, it's actually the opposite. Full moon, I don't want it. But another thing is the moon moves so much faster than the sun, right?
It does.
And you can look, or if you've been out there night fishing, you go, at 10:30, that moon goes over the hill anyway. It might be a full moon, but it was up during the day, and it's falling, and at 10:30, it's dark, and the moon's gone. So just because it's going to be full moon doesn't mean that, it's going to be in your face.
At times I've almost felt okay with moonlight because I
Sure.
The other thing that I think that I change is that I almost fish like a daytime angler because there's always a shaded bank almost, and
Right
so
on.
we're already dealing with a limited set of ideas of where those fish are. But then if I just target that particularly shaded water on the banks, if anything, I have a better view of where I'm casting. And so I'll go out on my own limb a little bit and just say that I don't mind bright overhead moonlight, and I haven't found that it's totally shut down my success. But yeah, if I have my perfect night, it's with either a small moon or little moonlight, I guess.
Right. And so I'm with you on that. I mean, moonlight doesn't mean that I'm not going to have any success.
Right.
Well, it's like the sun. If the moon is right upstream and in the fish's eyes, I think for me that's bad. That's I don't like the sun like that either. Mm-hmm. And brown trout just don't seem to like that. Yep. And though even in that case, you can still find them tucked away under those banks or whatever. It's shade. It's summer when it's summertime. You have that shade. Another thing is, especially early on, I did go out and I enjoyed those moonlit nights, those brighter nights. Yeah. Because it helped me adjust and get a feel for what nighttime fishing is like.
Right.
And then maybe the moon would go over the hill and be like, well, I'm adjusting. It gives you time. It gives you a way to ease into it. I don't mind it either, as long as it's not in their eyes.
I mean, there's a very practical reason too with the light in their eyes in terms of what we're expecting them to see. Like we would in the daytime, a trout looking into the sun is going to have a maybe more difficult time, or it'll take longer until they notice a nymph that's right in front of them because of that blinding light, And the same with the moonlight. I think if we can get that moonlight behind them or even not there at all, the silhouette of our flies may have a more effective, the trout may be more effective at finding and locating that fly and then eating it.
Yeah, so I'll mention that I think that the reason night fishing is successful in the first place is because on the best nights, the big trout will move into the shallows and pick on the bait fish. That's the way I think of it. Because the bait fish don't often live out in the middle of the river. Most bait fish and crayfish, small trout and whatnot, are on the edges in the ankle deep stuff, in the calf deep stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the best nights, those bigger trout take advantage of the cover of darkness and go over there where, the predators aren't going to pick on them. And even though those big trout, let's say if we are fishing, we're trying to target the big ones. Let's say the big trout are like kind of the dominant species. And even during the day, no eagle is even going to pick up that 2-foot brown trout. I still think they have that wariness about, I'm sure. We know it. They still have that wariness about them. They aren't going to go into exposed places very often on a sunny day over there where the bait fish are. You know why? I think because they can do it at night. Yeah. And that's what we're looking to do is meet them on those terms.
Yeah. And we've all caught larger fish with injuries from herons and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so there certainly is predation that I think that they do avoid by doing that at night. And something about the bait fish seems to activate more at night too. Like the activity of bait fish sure seems to activate more at night. Yeah. If you just turn on your light as you're walking along the river at night, you're going to see a lot more activity than you do if you're walking along the bank.
And frogs and crayfish. Oh, absolutely, and mice
frogs.
Right.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah, those motivation
That's what
pieces.
Happens.
It feels like the night is like its own ecosystem that like comes alive when the lights go out. And I think that's been a fun thing that you and I have noticed, Josh, is like exploring a little bit of that on the banks. It's just been fun to kind of solidify for us that the food source is there that's luring these fish into those locations.
Yeah, and that food source gets more active, absolutely, at night. Because I think they're spending most of their day, if you take a crayfish, most of the daytime they're spending kind of hiding out. Sure, you're going to see them once in a while, especially when you walk through the shallows, they spook. Boy, at night, like you said, Josh, man, you turn your lights on, you put your light on a piece of water that's calf deep, and man, they're just bang, 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 just everywhere, just darting around everywhere. Especially in the summertime, and there we are again. But I think on the high moonlit nights, I don't see that quite as much. And I'll say too, when there's a strong influence of city light, if you're right in town, or even if you have the lights of town on the horizon, and then you have those lights reflecting into the clouds, it depends on how bright that is. That does change things. It changes things for us. I think it changes things for the bait fish, which is a great point, Josh.
Yeah.
I think it changes things for the trout as well.
I think that's a cool point. That's like bit of a new thought for me that those nights with the bright moonlight, there could be even a secondary reason why the action is slower along the banks. And it could be because the relative exposed nature of the bait fish kind of drives them into more retreated locations, which then obviously leads the fish away as well. So that's actually pretty interesting.
It is, right?
See, we're talking about night fishing. We're coming up with new ideas.
That's right. Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's right. Because nobody has the answers. You just have some experience and some theory.
There is a certain element of like city light that is helpful, I think.
Sure.
It's when it gets a lot stronger than a clear night without the moon would be, because I think that's the ideal situation, is the amount of light that the stars give off.
Yeah.
If you get this real hazy night and there's no cities around, then you've got a lot of darkness that's really kind of tough to overcome and tough for your eyes to adjust to. But if there's just the smallest amount of light, so on an overcast night, I'd prefer that there is some ambient light rather than none, just miles away from anything.
Josh and I were commiserating about how the day after we night fish, our eyes are always bloodshot because we're staring so intently at a bank we can't see that we're like.
That's a good point.
Just dries them out because I won't blink.
My contact, absolutely. I've seriously noticed that. My contacts will kind of dry out on night fishing nights. Absolutely.
It's funny.
Well, as far as city lights go, I'm just talking about even small towns. One of our favorite rivers runs right through town. Mm-hmm. And it's lit up all the way through town. I mean, they even have lights on the river because there's a walkway there. And I've had people say, I was night fishing. I'm like, oh, where'd you go? Well, it's down there right in town where they have that walkway. I'm like, well, I'm not judging. I'm not saying it's not night fishing, but to us, that's not really night fishing, right? We're trying to get out there away from things, first of all. Mm-hmm. And I don't want the light. I guess what we're saying here, we all find that the darker, the better. You do get that more natural reaction from the trout. Maybe it is because of the more natural reaction from the bait fish.
Yeah.
Those things are important. Less light, usually better. So what about our own lights? What about our headlights, flashlights, and then glow-in-the-dark stuff? Hit on that, guys. The artificial stuff we got to bring out there with us.
If you get out to a night fishing trip and realize you forgot your headlamp, that's pretty devastating, because I think
done. That's like forgetting your waders.
Because there's so many roles that plays, the least of which is when you're actually fishing. But to hike into the locations that we often, to hike into locations, or even just gearing up in the back of the truck or anything like that, it's so valuable to have that accessory light that it really is difficult to make that happen. I mean, you're walking with even if you walk with it broken down, you're walking with a now 5-foot long rod that's typically geared up already, because it's so difficult to completely gear up out in the field at night. But you're walking with all your gear through woods, fields, whatever you're fishing in terms of habitat. And that's just a really difficult thing to do without any light whatsoever. But you're also trying to minimize your impact on your environment. And so as we get close to the river or get close to the stream, we're shutting down our lights to just red light typically, or no light, and allowing our eyes to adjust a little bit. And sometimes we take a minute on the bank, just kind of standing there and just sort of like talking about what the water looks like once we actually get there, and letting our eyes adjust. But beyond that, we might only use the light for those bank flashes briefly, and then a red light for re-rigging or tying on a new fly. You don't need anything more than red light for that.
No,
agreed.
Yeah. And I think likely we could probably all tie a fly on, especially with that 15-pound test that we're using, whatever it is.
Without a light?
I'm sure that we could tie it without a light, but it sure is helpful just to turn away from where you're fishing, flash a dim red light on, and tie it on real quick and be back in the water.
That's it. Avoid light on the water whenever possible.
Yeah.
The only, I guess, we talked about the bank flash, but that's a relatively rare thing that we do. And then once your eyes get adjusted, once I walk in, I'm done with white light. I might be done with white light until the end of the night.
Except for those bank flashes.
Right on. Good point. Sometimes, honestly, I bank flash with a red light.
Really?
If it's a strong
I do
red
that.
light.
I actually do that. Yeah.
Yep.
I keep my red light on really dim, because so mine's got a dimmer on it, and so like I can dim the red light, and then that's the setting, and it saves for the night.
That's good.
And you can reset it, but I would like it to be I mean, as dim as possible because I want to just be able to see my hands.
Gotcha.
That's nice.
When I'm tying.
Tactical Fly Fisher was started in 2015 by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson, with a mission to bring American anglers the techniques and gear that dominate the international competitive fly fishing scene. While you may have no desire to compete, you can still benefit from the same strategies which competitive anglers use to make them more successful on the water. Whether you want to buy a Euro-nymphing rod, a stillwater fly line, or just some hooks and beads to fill your fly box, we've got you covered. And our teaching materials will help you learn how to use whatever products fill up your cart. Head on over to thetacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TFF10 to get 10% off flies, fly tying supplies, or terminal tackle.
Precision Fly and Tackle is a family-owned business with a passion for the outdoors and a sense of adventure. They are anglers who enjoy every moment spent on the water with family and friends. Precision Fly and Tackle carries the widest selection of Euro rods, reels, lines, leaders, flies, and accessories. From the beginner to the advanced angler, Precision Fly and Tackle can outfit every angler, no matter the budget. Visit them online at precisionflyandtackle.com. Then use code Troutbitten10, that's the number 10, for 10% off your order. Gear up with Precision Fly and Tackle for your next adventure. So, in the Troutbitten article that I wrote, the headlights, flashlights, and glow-in-the-dark stuff, I go over, my favorite headlamp and why. And one of the reasons is it's dim. I don't want the brightest light out there. And that's a great point, Josh. I don't want even the brightest red light I can find. No, because it then hurts your vision. You turn the red light off and you feel blind again. So we're actually looking for a dim headlamp. And yeah, if it can also go super bright, maybe for the walkout, that's cool too. But I also then keep in my pocket just a regular flashlight. And I use that flashlight for charging up some glow-in-the-dark stuff, which helps in fishing tactics. And I use that flashlight sometimes for the walkout or relocating, or especially then for kind of spotting those shallows to see what's going on with those bait fish. Or maybe when you're relocating, if you're going 200 miles, try that again. If you're going 200 yards upstream, I might flash that bank a couple times, just those shallows to see, are big trout sitting in this, in the sides? They don't do it every night. I said on the good nights, they go over there and pick on the bait fish. Plenty of nights, they just don't seem to be in the shallows either yet, or they're not going to do it at all. And then my tactics may be very different. Anyway, that's why I use the flashlight.
Yeah. So another thing that you mentioned is for charging stuff.
Yeah, the glow in the dark.
Yeah. I guess 2 years ago, we actually switched from using like our headlamps or a flashlight like that to using a decently strong like UV tying lights.
Yeah.
And we found that you can we're using glow in the dark line and sometimes glow in the dark indicators.
Yeah.
I've even tried like glow in the dark putty,
I know. Yeah.
I'll say it. I didn't like it at all.
It's hard to find it. Not big enough. Yeah.
I even tried painting my face with glow-in-the-dark paint, but that didn't work either.
It was spooky.
It was too spooky.
But man, the UV light works really well for
Yeah.
charging quick line quickly or indicators quickly. Like it really is. You can turn it on in your hand in a fist.
Yeah.
And you can slide the line through that fist.
Yeah.
And it's like pulling out a lightsaber. I mean, it just comes out like shining.
Glowing.
Yeah. So our buddy Sloop is going to make it into this podcast too. And I'll mention that Sloop gave me a glow-in-the-dark line and it changed my my night fishing life.
Yeah.
He just had found it in a clearance bin for like $10. He said, "You night fish, right? Try this out." I didn't even try it right away, but as soon as I did, I went, "Oh, there we go." Because I used to paint stuff with glow-in-the-dark paint, and I was trying everything. I knew I needed some kind of visual aid out there, or else you're just kind of casting blind. And if you can do that and make it work, great. But it's so much better with a glow-in-the-dark line. A couple companies make them. They're all good. I don't charge the whole thing. I don't care if the whole thing is charged, right? If the last
foot and a half, 2 feet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I go like 4 feet, sometimes even 6 feet of the
Okay.
line I want to be charged. I like to see if I have a bow in the line or whatnot.
Oh, that's a good point. I go short too. It's like, I mean, maybe just a foot, just because I know that
we're using
7
it to
feet past
know
that
how
is-
how far away our fly is, I think.
Right.
More
And you
so,
have a
but-
6, 7, 8 foot leader, whatever it is.
Yeah,
You know
right.
you kind of know where your fly is there.
Yeah.
Well, not kind of. You very much know where your fly is then.
Yep.
And when I night fish, when I nymph at night, I call it a night sighter. And so I take the running line portion of the back end of a weight forward glow-in-the-dark fly line, 20 inches of that. I tie nail knots on the end, and basically I put it right in my leader where a sighter normally would be.
Yeah.
And it's heavier than a normal sighter. Yeah, it causes a little bit of sag.
Sure. But you can also put on big flies at night to nymph with if you want to.
Josh is holding up his night sighter. That's nice. So I use that a fair amount. We talk about the mono rig a lot. And I will do night nymphing. We're going to get into tactics here in just a little bit. But that's a glow-in-the-dark thing that, once again, I use the light to charge it up. You can do the UV light. Like, I know both of you guys do that. I've taken them out. I kind of go back and forth on that. Again, like, I don't really want it. I don't even the glow-in-the-dark line, most nights I don't even want it to be really bright. I will say, if I'm, near city light or it's a moonlit night, you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's when you need a really charged up glow-in-the-dark piece.
Or if you're dealing with backlight.
Nice, good point, right on.
Street lights, floodlights, whatever it might be.
But on those dark nights, man, it almost like hurts your night vision if you have a really a bright lightsaber out there. Yeah. And it holds a charge for what, guys? 15, 20 minutes? Really good?
I probably recharge it every 5 to 10.
Do you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm just doing that tip portion, so I think it's easier to lose sight of the whole thing more quickly. But
it definitely stays bright enough to see for a long time.
For sure.
So there comes a point where if you feel like you're working to know where it's at, then it's time.
And I will say, we'll address this real quickly, that I thought, okay, I bet this might help me, but I bet it's going to spook fish. I don't know that it does. I don't know that I've had nights where I go, man, this glow-in-the-dark line really seems to turn them off.
If it does at all, the trade-off is worth it because...
There you go. Good point.
It is kind of interesting, too, how much glow-in-the-dark bug life there is at night. And I think, obviously, some of it's just the fireflies that we'll see. Yeah. But, it seems like a decent number of things on the banks glowing and other insects that might emit some iridescence, or not iridescence, but actual night glow.
Oh yeah, you see that all the time. Right? It's like, wait, were those eyes that my light hit?
Right.
Wait, I don't have any light on, so it can't be. What were those?
Right. I know.
And you're like, it wasn't fireflies or something. There are certainly things glowing out there. I'm not sure what they are, but
I think it's sort of a
chupacabra.
We'll get into that with the fear element.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's move into tactics a little bit. Boy, we don't have time to really dig deep. We're going to. I'm sure we're talking about it already. We're going to do a full podcast series, tactical series, where we try to do 5, 6, 8, or maybe 10 episodes on night fishing. It'll be about a half hour long. We'll probably go through almost all of these. We're just trying to breeze through them, give a bit of a plan or maybe a path forward to kind of get into some things. In general, I group tactics into either you're drifting or you're swinging. To me, swinging flies is against the current. Usually it's casting across and letting them swing downstream, down and across. Great. If the fly has tension and it's against the current, that to me is swinging the flies. And drifting is the opposite, where I'm drifting with the current. I cast upstream or up and across, and the current is pushing the flies back toward me. Rather than the current pulling the flies away from me, which is swinging, the current is now pushing the flies toward me, and that's drifting. I'm calling it drifting, though, because it's not necessarily dead drifting. In this case, to me, I'm just saying anything that is coming back downstream toward me, even if it has some tension on it and it's crossing seams a little bit, that's drifting. Down and going the other way is swinging. And some nights it's drifting that works, and some nights it's the opposite, swinging strategies, right?
Yeah. I think when we started night fishing, I think I was more of 100% drifting, or at least a good amount of drifting. I wouldn't say 100%, but I've certainly learned to recheck the swinging presentation multiple times throughout the night, because I've found fish on nights where there otherwise weren't fish that seemed to be active, that seemed to be turned on by that swing, and take on the swing or just after the swing, that may have been following the fly up until that point, or might have just seen the flash of movement as it swung and were attracted to it.
And you can drift and swing both on top and underneath. These are just directions and tension directions, I guess, of the flies.
I think Josh and I often think, like, are we starting the night on top or underneath? And then we also will compare, like, are we or is it an active retrieve from a drifted position, or is it more of a passive kind of like they took it on the pause, or they took it in a passive swing as the fly just swung out in the current? And then was it on the bank, or was it in the middle, or was it kind of in between the two? What kind of water type was it in?
There you go.
As we kind of like compare, what fish we're catching, that the tactics are a big part of it for us.
For sure.
And maybe it's important to mention that very rarely are we starting a night off. Maybe never are we starting with like a nymph presentation. I don't know that we've actually mentioned that. This is usually a streamer or wet fly, at least to start, because we see a lot of success with that at night.
Or up top, or a surface pattern. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But sometimes it does take actually switching over.
Right on.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd say about that, there were months at a time where I would just focus on. I was trying to develop a night nymphing game. So I'd say that's all I'm going to do tonight. And I suppose in the winter, or let's say in the colder months, I have more faith in a nymphing presentation. Not always, but there's sometimes. I'm just saying there's sometimes I'll start with a nymphing presentation. But I'll say I do it so much during the day. I nymph so much during the day. Basically, I try to get dead drifts all the time during the day, unless I'm fishing streamers. Whether it's up top with a dead drift or nymphs underneath, mostly a dead drift. When I'm night fishing, I like to do something different. And there's this. If you swing flies, like think of a wet fly swing, cast across, let it swing down. That is arguably the easiest way to get into it. Choose some big wet flies, swing them, see what happens. Cover some water, wade downstream. I don't think there's anything easier than doing that. And when you are night fishing, don't make it hard at first.
Yeah,
you know?
That's a good point.
I think that's why, let's say most of the stuff you read is going to tell you to do that. Swing wet flies downstream, or, swing mouse patterns. And, that'll work too.
Yeah.
What about fly types then, right? That we're kind of branching into that.
I think fly types for us have changed a little bit out of necessity. We found early on in night fishing that there was a difference between getting strikes and getting hookups on flies. And so we found that certain patterns that maybe were more popularly used. So particularly mice. I mean, we started kind of just being like, hey, let's go mousing. Let's fish mice at night. That's what people do. And we had a lot of attention drawn to those flies.
A lot of interactions.
We called them. We kind of started to break down our nights between like hit, strikes, splashes, misses, whatever, kind of, and then hookups. And we had a lot of strikes and a lot of, misses and very few hookups. So it was really exciting and gave us a lot of like adrenaline rushes, but we quickly realized that this was a very inefficient way to fish. And so we started trying to kind of, we started to tie flies on our benches that we thought might provide for us some of the benefits of the surface aspects of the mice, and yet have a more effective way that the fish could get that in their mouth, and maybe just like either hook positions, sizes of hook, like an articulated pattern, having a hook rearward in the fly as well as near the head. And I don't know. I think we're probably 80% of the time that we're out there at night, we're using something that is a little bit of a hybrid between a traditional mouse and then like a streamer that feels like it gives us a little bit of the best of both worlds.
Right on. We covered a lot of that in the mouse emerger episode. We say that now like we're serious about it, but it was a joke at first when we said a mouse emerger. Well, like you said, the surface mouse just got so many hits. It was too big of an ask for even the biggest fish in the river to come all the way up to eat it on the first hit too,
and break water.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so while they're fun, I think a lot of people are intrigued by that. But man, they're all over this. Yeah, okay. Do it for 5 nights. Let me know how many actual hookups you get, and not foul hooked, And absolutely. I've caught good fish that did break the surface, as you said. Sure, it happens. But we all started here to try to do something better. Not ask quite as much. Give them more of something to eat, a little easier eat. Anyway, we detail that pretty well on the Mouse Emerger episode 3, season 1. And I have articles on the Troutbitten website about it. So let's just run through fly types. So let's say there's the pure mouse, like just pure surface pattern. It doesn't even
always
have to be
have them in my box. Yeah.
Right.
And
on.
I will always
Same.
use them in rotation because I still catch good fish on them. Yep.
They make a great wake on the surface, right?
Yeah.
And that's an attractive thing. I think that's why trout are,
unsinkable.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They give you a really good idea on whether the fish are looking up that night.
Sure thing. Yep. And
that's a good
there's
point,
probably nothing more exciting than a mouse eat. Like a just bang.
Yeah.
That's it. That might be the biggest adrenaline rush in the fly fishing that we do anyway.
Yeah.
That is it. And that is exciting.
Sure.
So pure surface pattern.
Yeah.
Whatever that pattern is. And then we're doing this mouse emerger concept, which as you said, you kind of have part of the fly underneath, or maybe even most of the fly underneath. And yet, for me, there's still something that's on the surface, I'm going to say, or at least barely on the surface. There's still some wake involved.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen a muskrat swim across the water, it's like that. You see like the top of its head.
There you go.
And all of the rest of its body's underneath, right?
And there are very much different degrees.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a deer hair head, sometimes I'll put paste on that head to keep it kind of floating. I know you guys do that. And so how much of a wake do you want? How much of that fly do you want to be available underneath, Yeah. I love it too. That's become my favorite fly style.
Yeah.
And then, we have streamers, and you can ride really light streamers. I use one I call a Rogue. We've addressed that. And that's underneath. That's not trying to be on the surface. But it's light, and it's only in the first 6 inches of the water column, I'll say. Of course, you can keep going lower with streamers that are, let's say, weighted. Ride them in the middle. Yeah. You could put split shot there and just do whatever you want to get those streamer patterns down. And then, of course, you can ride your wet flies at all kinds of different levels. There's the George Harvey night fly that we all use in rotation.
The pushers.
Right? The pushers. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then nymphs down low. And you can use small nymphs, but I don't. The smallest nymph I use is like a size 10 stone fly. Most of them are bigger. And really, when I say nymphs, what I'm usually doing is some kind of bugger variation. And but I will nymph it. So those are the kind of fly types. Did I miss anything?
No, I think that's good. And I think within that grouping, there's ones that we probably want to spend more time figuring out.
Right on. What's your favorite?
The mouse emerger, I think, is my favorite. Yeah. We've just gotten to know it so well. So it feels like your favorite arrow in the quiver.
But there's a reason too. I mean, it produces, right?
Yeah, it produces. And it gives so much versatility. Which is great because it lets us kind of do different things with it.
You guys call it the Pendragon, right? And I love that.
We do.
I have people asking me all the time, "Hey, is there a Pendragon pattern on Troutbitten? Is there a recipe for that?" I'm like, "Nope." it's kind of the guy's little secret, semi-secret, but I don't know.
We get messages sometimes,
right? I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
Do you? But Josh, like sometimes you take that Pendragon and you put split shot in front of it and get it down under.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so again, Trevor, you said it can be so versatile.
And sometimes I tie in a piece of foam, so the tail really does hang down, but the head rides high,
Absolutely. Just to give it that buoyancy without paste or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then I will say too, one more thing about fly types. I'll run a small fly with a large fly. And so maybe I do have a Pendragon or what I call a bad mother on the point. And I will say I used to trail them. I thought, well, heck, if they're going for this mouse pattern, but they won't eat it, well, then I'll give them something behind that maybe they will eat. The bait and switch kind of thing. We do a lot of this during the day. And I just kept foul hooking fish with a small fly. And I didn't like that. Nobody would. And it didn't really matter. Even if I put it 30 inches back, I was still foul hooking fish way too often. Didn't like it. So I started running it on a tag, the smaller fly on a tag, 20, 24, 30 inches up. And I'm still stunned by how often sometimes the biggest trout of the season even will eat a size 6 wet fly, which is pretty small for a night fly, right?
Yeah.
And then there it is. And so I usually put smaller things up top on my tag. And almost always, 90% of the time I'm running 2 flies. The bigger one on the point and something on that tag. It's like it doesn't do any damage. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't hurt my drift.
Even with like a mouse pattern, I don't think it matters.
No, right. It's not going to drag that mouse under.
No. Yeah.
And then you can just kind of dangle it and maybe dap it. I can't really see it happening, but boy, I get some vicious strikes on that wet fly when it seems like maybe it was almost just barely touching the water.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I can kind of see the angle that my leader was at because I can see the bow in that glowing fly line. There's a lot to it, right? It's fun.
Yeah, there is. It's interesting reading some of the older books and things written on night fishing and how much they used wet flies. It certainly makes me want to, at some point, feel like I've mastered that a little bit more, or maybe find it as a technique to utilize more on those slower nights. And even in switching water types, we've been out nights this year where there's a lot of hatching bug activity. And the activity for us has been slow in the water type that we're fishing and on the banks. And I think on those nights, they're probably focused on riffles and, faster water where the bugs are emerging. And so
nice.
I would like to carry over some wet fly swinging kind of techniques into that water type on those nights if I could.
That's kind of a good point right there, just running through the fly types. And as I'm thinking about it, I don't use nymphs near the bank very much.
Mm-hmm,
but if I find that trout aren't in those locations that I expect them to be, like we've talked about, where they should be over there picking on the bait fish in the shallower and slower water, then I'll go ahead right back into the stuff I would be nymphing during the day, and I will go ahead and nymph that. Yeah. You guys, I'm sure, do the same.
Yeah.
I'll fish streamers at medium depth, through some knee deep or thigh deep or even belt deep water. Just to kind of see what will happen. I'll swing them and I'll drift them, different things. I am right in line with you guys there of that. It's sort of bank approach usually, with the mousy merger being my favorite because it does seem to produce the most.
Yeah.
And often the biggest trout. And it is the most fun.
Mm-hmm.
You get some really,
and
great
its conversion
strikes.
rate's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's secure, a lot of secure hookups.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but it's not all I do. But that conversion rate, I will say that's gotten a lot better for me once I started doing what I call a slow slide and kind of understanding when to strike too. And you let them take it a little bit. That's kind of a whole subject right there.
Yeah, we could talk about just hook sets for a long time.
I know.
Yeah.
That's a big mystery out there. That is another thing we'll talk about when we get together, right? I mean, were they tapping it before they hit it? Or were they just eating it, aggressive? Yeah, that's neat. Hey, what else on water types, guys?
Trevor, you'd agree, a lot of times we look for really, really great prime lies in the day, and we just look for the soft stuff that's around it.
That's a nice way to put it.
Easy banks, because if it's not close, I don't think a big trout is traveling 50 yards upstream very often. Yeah. Not very often to feed. I think they just move
Certainly
over.
Not like 500.
I just think that they move over, move a little down, move a little up.
Right on.
Yeah. Although I think we've noticed or we've observed some cruising trout behavior, but I think that it's rare for us to feel like we hook up with that fish, because who knows where they're swimming.
We had one
belly flop around us.
Yeah, we had one just going berserk the other night. I mean, 50 yards downstream, then 50 yards upstream, then 100 yards upstream, just cruising and just being acting berserk.
Yeah.
And it really seemed to be the same fish. Yeah.
I've seen that. And there's every reason to believe it's the same fish. You can kind of chart its progress. Oh, man, it splashed over there. Oh, right. Yeah. You almost predict where it's going to.
Right. Yep. And you never hear two splashes at once. It's always one.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's, my explanation is the same as yours. It's cruising around and picking on, I don't know, weak things that it finds in the system or just chasing things and eating them.
Having fun doing it.
And it seems to be having fun. That's right. Yeah, so Josh, that's a great way to put it. That's what I look for too. Where are those prime lies in the daytime? And then where would those trout move at night when they are under the cover of darkness and they do want to go get the easy meal with those active bait fish and crayfish and small trout, whatever. Yeah, you kind of predict those water types. I mean, we should acknowledge that lots of people tell you to fish the tailouts of a pool. And yeah, I have success there plenty of times. I think for me, I have more success on the banks, but I have to be committed to cover and water. I am not just going to stand in one spot and hit one piece of bank for, hardly any length of time, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, but not much. But I think tailouts are often talked about because you could fish the middle of the pool, work your way down into the tailout and just be swinging down through that tailout, and even imagine swinging through the lip of the tailout and then stripping the flies back. You could do that for an hour, maybe 2, and then you could go back up and do it again. And that's an easier way, arguably, to cover water. It's probably more, it's more comfortable. Your footing is more predictable. You don't have to walk back, through the woods afterward.
Right.
I think it's a great way to do it too. And it's a good way to kind of get your feet wet. Target some tail outs, see what happens.
Yep.
But the bank is where it's at.
I think so. Bank or, some kind of structure. But what other structures are as good as the bank, right?
Yeah. Well, and when you can combine the bank with a little bit of structure on the bank, I feel like, even if it's a little cove or a little there's a lot of different features that I'll look for that kind of key me into maybe a particular area, an alcove or like a big rock along the bank that sort of has a soft cushion in front and behind it. And
especially if there's a cushion between the rock and the bank.
Yeah, for sure.
While we're talking about banks, one thing that I think I just started to think about more when I noticed it this past week while out night fishing was there is a really, really, if you can't see very well, there's a very distinct sound that a fly makes when it's hitting water right against the bank than when it's hitting the water a foot away from the bank. Like a really distinct sound. It's a lot more hollow, and usually it's bouncing off the things that are hanging right over it. But I mean, that's just like a few, like sometimes that's just like a small amount of leaves, grass, whatever it is up against that bank. There's a very hollow and echoey sound that a fly makes when it hits water 3 inches away from the bank versus you might not hear it hit the water at all when it's like out in just a foot out into the current more.
It's a good sound, isn't it? Right.
It really
I know
is.
what you're saying. I think when it hits in the current, it doesn't make that sound. Well, maybe because the current's moving and just doesn't splat the same way. When you get that splat or that sound you're talking about, it is hard to describe. Yeah, I gotcha. You hit it in that softer water. Yep.
And you could be fishing softer water and you're still going to get a different sound when you're when that fly is tucking under something because it really does echo a little bit.
That's neat.
I mean, it really does. I like multiple times this week I noticed that when I would get it right underneath something, you'd hear that, like a little bit of an echo as you heard it off of 2 different locations as it hit and off of whatever it was below. It's pretty cool.
That is cool. So are big trout always next to the banks, right? I mean, how do we find our if you really want to fish the big trout, if that's what we're after, I mean, where are you going to find them? Is there something about locations that we're missing here as we're talking?
I do think part of location for us is just that it's sort of like having a confidence fly. Like you commit to fishing something you're confident in. And I think we're fishing for a certain subset of trout that are on the banks. And because we're confident that there are some trout on the banks, we're willing to fish the banks hard. But I do think that there are big and good fish throughout the water in different locations. And I do think that as I grow to be a more experienced night fisherman, I'd like to be as quick to change and cover those water types as I do in the daytime at night. Yeah. And I think if we could do that, we would find even more fish. But it's really hard to do that effectively at night, and switching is a little bit more cumbersome because of the light problem. And so for us, I think it's been most successful to really key in on a particular water type and say, hey, this strategy, these flies, this set of flies, we're going to fish this hard. And we're going to find the few fish that are in these types of locations and we're going to catch them. Sure. So I think I don't think that we're fishing the only big fish that are there. I think there are probably 5 times the number of big fish there that we know. Yeah. And yet we found something that we can reproduce.
That's a great way to put it. It's a good strategy too. Don't try to do too much.
No.
Do something that has produced and should produce again and that you're effective at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a spot out in the middle of one of our favorite rivers, and it's really out in the middle. It's just a pothole, and the big fish hang out there in the daylight, and then, they're often there. Boy, I don't miss that spot. As I'm hitting the banks, I go, well, before I get very close to this, I'm going to swing down through that or whatever, drift up through that. And I can think of 3 good fish that I caught right out of that pothole or very, very close to it.
Nice.
And you might not see it until you step in it the first time.
Yeah, right on. Yep. Yeah. And those are the kind of places, you get to know your river, and not just in the daytime, but you get to know that river at night in a whole different way. That's a neat thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the mystery. That's a big part of the mystery out there. And all rivers have their mystery during the daylight. I mean, that's why we love fly fishing in general, right? Once you get to know a river well at night where you can, like I said, just navigate it by knowing landmarks, feeling it with your boots. That's a different piece of the puzzle. And you've solved not solved, but you've understood a different part of that mystery. That's special.
Yeah.
Do you guys fish the same spots a lot? Or are you like big on just exploring something new every time you're out for locations?
Oh, certainly not every time.
No.
We're somewhat repetitive.
I think individually, when I fish alone, I fish different spots almost every time.
Nice.
Which I'm not sure why, but when we're together, we're usually fishing similar stretches. I think if we had more with time, if we had the luxury of time, we would fish a lot more diversity of waters. And I think we will continue to do that moving forward. I think one of the reasons we don't do that is we're already sifting through a myriad of variables to try to find like, okay, what is a real indication of success and what do we want to repeat? And if we continue to change locations at this stage, I feel like we'll lose something in our discovery process and in what we're keeping with us as like, hey, this was successful. But how do we know? We just switched water types. Was it just that it was a different water or river?
There you go.
Yeah. So I think in time we'll start rotating between a larger and larger number of waters.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And you say that, but we've changed something about our location of fishing together every single time we've been out this year. Like whether it's true. Like fishing extra 100 yards downstream or walk up an extra,
That's a really good point.
300 yards upstream than normal,
or even fish the opposite bank that we usually fish.
Opposite bank a lot, Yeah, we've done...
How much water do we cover at night? What about that? Average, just to average it out. Give me a number.
I'd say 400 to 500 yards.
Same. 4 or 5, yep. I was going to say 500 yards.
It's a good bit.
It is. At night, And how long's the average night trip? I'm going to say for me 4 hours. 4 to 5 hours.
4 to 5 hours is probably pretty good.
4 or 5, yep.
And we like dark, right? We're not talking dusk. And whatever, sometimes I'll start at dusk.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, this past week we ended up fishing like the water where we went was a little dirtier. Yeah. And it got pretty tough as it got darker. And and most of our action came right as it was getting dark. Mm-hmm. Something with visibility. The water got pretty chocolatey.
It was,
and that's tough. But the success that we did have came early when it was light.
Should mention that quickly too. That I don't like fishing. I know none of us like fishing muddy water at night. I basically don't do it anymore. I've tried it. Yeah. Dirty water, even like really dirty, that's pushing it. Yeah. I've had some good times right after or even during thunderstorms where it is getting dirty. That can be pretty good or it can be bad because it's night fishing.
And we like it low too.
Yeah, right. We like it low and clear. For me, the lower and clearer, the better at night. Yeah. For me.
You mentioned at the beginning that some of these rivers that we're talking about are like max flows of 700 maybe cubic feet per second, but we're like looking for them to get down to 170, 220.
Absolutely. Thanks. Like, that's a good point.
Nice and low.
Are you guys scared out there?
Yes.
Were you scared at first? Or
yes, I'm very scared.
I had a couple weeks ago, I had like the nightmare happen where something huge hits your leg, and it was a log, but it was like halfway. It wasn't on the ground, it wasn't on the surface. It was like halfway, which is like that real unsettling point where it just like hits the crook of your knee, and it just like held there with the current.
It keeps like pressing into you.
Yeah. Oh, it scared.
I had a big fish go right through my legs last week.
That was weird.
So we were walking in really muddy water.
Yep.
And it was, man, it felt huge, but it clearly wiggled and kind of like flipped and went right between my legs, and I felt it. And it was a large fish.
I'll be honest.
Big old sucker.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think a lot of times they're suckers or carp.
Yeah.
Especially in some of the waters that I've had fish bump into me or go through your legs like you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've had them do that.
Ooh, it's unsettling.
Yeah, it is. It's very strange. Anything that bumps into you. I had a porcupine hit me one time. I've had, like you're saying, logs and things like that. I haven't had many encounters with beaver. Yeah, there are things that scare us out there, right? But for me, like fighting that fear, like you said, Josh, the whole thing is a real challenge, right? And I do like to fish alone because I like that extra element to it. there's something I have enjoyed from the beginning about that challenge. It's like, yeah, I'm afraid. I'm going to go do it. I like this. And eventually, though, really, seriously, it took seasons. And then I finally understood that there's like nothing happens out there. There's really nothing to be afraid of. And so I'm not afraid when I'm night fishing anymore. It's probably been, it's been years, many years since I've actually been afraid on the average night. But there are scary things that happen out there to you, like a log bumping into you.
Oh my goodness.
And we've talked about it before, like deer jumping in, or, there are just scary things or unsettling things.
We've had coyotes on the bank, and that's kind of disconcerting.
Or even people, didn't we mention that?
It's probably the worst, honestly. That's probably my least favorite thing to run into.
Yeah.
Because it's rare that there's somebody out that late at night with good purposes in mind.
That's right.
Yeah.
How late do you guys fish?
3.
Later than
4.
Most.
Later than me.
Yeah. So I think we were victims or benefits of early success late at night. And in our first season of night fishing, second seasons, I don't know. We've often had success and caught some of our biggest fish between 2 and 3 a.m. And so if it's a decent night of fishing earlier, we'll probably push it if we can and try to either circle back to water we've covered or move to new water and hit it at those hours, because we
certainly try to hit prime spots around those hours sometimes.
I notice when I fish with other people, and I have night fished with a couple other people, I'm more willing to just, I think you kind of push each other. You're like, we can stay another hour. It's 2. We can stay till 3. Come on, we can stay till 4,
It's always me, isn't it, Josh?
Kind of is. Yeah.
It also depends if I've traveled, and I'm like, well, I'll try to make the most out of these miles.
Right.
If it's a local stream, then I go, well, all right, I caught some fish. I'll get out of here. Boy, I couldn't catch anything. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Hey, one more thing. I think this is important: the rods and the lines. Right? Everybody wants to know about the gear. We haven't addressed it much because I'm going to say you can do all of the stuff we mentioned with probably any rod that you already fish now. I wouldn't go out there with a 2-weight. Go ahead. You'll get them in, maybe. Anyway, what are your favorite, real quick, rods? Let's do rods.
I'm fishing a 9-foot 6-weight.
Same with me.
Yeah.
I'm fishing a 10-foot 6-weight, which I don't know. I think I would like to go back to a 9-foot 6-weight. That extra foot, I don't think it gains me a whole lot, and it's a little bit cumbersome at times. But my thinking was that I could hold more line off the water, and I could animate the fly from further away. And it can do that, I think. But it's also a little more cumbersome to cast, and I think just navigating some of the casts that I want to make, I don't know. I just don't. I don't know if I like it.
For me, I like being a little closer to my rod tip with that 1 foot less. 9-foot 6-weight for me. It used to be an 8.5 foot 5-weight because that's what I had. I'd beef it up a little bit. Yeah, you can push it to do what you want. Fish a 7, 8-weight. We don't find the need for that.
Right. And I think it's regional, right?
Right. Yeah, sure it is. Yeah. What's the biggest fly you guys are fishing? Like inches long, let's say.
Like a big
like
pen
4
dragon.
inches.
Yeah, big pen dragon might hit 4.5.
Yep. I'd say 4 to 5 inches is like my biggest. And yeah, it's got some air resistance to it. And that's why I'll go up to a 6-weight. It's not even for fighting big fish, but it kind of is too, because I want to get them in faster.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I know you guys feel the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even harder at night, I think, to control that fish from going downstream fast.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Well, oftentimes, I think that's because we're hooking it downstream of our position.
Sometimes, yeah.
So
And
that happens pretty often.
So being able to really fight it upstream and then land it quickly is really important to us.
Yeah. And that's why we beef up the tippets too, right?
Oh, yeah. I think my leader is probably a total of 6 to 7 feet.
Yeah.
And it starts out with 15-pound Maxima or Cortland leader material. And then that's typically ending in either anything from 10 to 15-pound tippet and then a tag that's 10-pound usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just go 20-pound for a few feet off my line and then 4 to 5 feet of 15-pound, and my tag is 15-pound also.
I'm similar. I'm somewhere in between you guys, and it might be anywhere from 6 to 8 feet, depending on what I want to do. And like I said, I run 2 flies almost all the time. I learned that if I was using that Harvey pusher, and I don't care how well you tie it, that line will twist if you don't have a beefy enough line. You can't fish a Harvey pusher on 3X. It will just twist.
No, you even notice a difference between the type of, like I've used fluorocarbon tippet material, at 15 pound, and it gives you way less stiffness than, Maxima 15 pound. And that makes a difference even in terms of how much twisting you're getting.
It does.
And you balance that with like how much animation in the fly can occur with that limper tippet. And I don't know, I think there's some trade-offs there.
Yeah. And so I started using the bigger diameters almost out of necessity. And that's what Harvey said, was use like 15 pound Maxima chameleon. And I started doing that. Then I'd switch flies and I'd be using the 15 or the 12 pound. And I'm like, well, it doesn't seem to make a difference. Trout are just not leader shy or tippet shy at night. No. And I feel really confident in saying that. And so I even fish my wet flies on like 10 pound.
Yep.
And when I nymph, I'm going to say the lightest I ever go is like 8 pound. Like an 8 pound, maybe a 3X, usually 2X would be about as light as I'd go when I'm nymphing at night.
Yeah.
So that's our rods, our lines. I don't think reels matter.
Oh.
I really don't. I just don't.
I agree.
The glow in the dark lines, I guess we mentioned that, right?
Yeah.
To all of us, that's really important.
It is.
There's really only a couple options out there in terms of glow in the dark line.
Yeah, SA makes one and Rio makes one.
Rio makes one, yeah.
I don't have a favorite. Hey guys, do you have anything else? Anything we missed? Anything real important or even kind of important?
I might mention just real quickly that I have a separate night fishing pack, and it's a smaller pack, and it's one that I have only items on it that I'm going to use at night. And for me, having a pared down set of items that I take out has led to me being able to access them all easily in the dark. Yeah. And for me, that's valuable. And I know for some, it's probably not. And I know you guys do this differently, but for my particular purposes, I find some value in having a separate night fishing pack that I can have at the ready, kind of outfitted with the tippets that I'm going to use for nighttime and everything.
Yeah, that planning, that organization, you find your own style for that. And then even, like you said, you'll go out there and decide, well, this is the tactic I want to do, and this is the water that I want to hit.
Yes.
For sure. I plan more at night than I do for my trips during the day. I always have my gear ready, whatever. But yeah, I'm more open-minded to changing plans during the day. Well, the fish don't want to do this, so I'll do that.
Yeah.
But now at night, well, because I've ruined many a night by trying to be too versatile.
Yep. Absolutely.
Last thing that I'd say is it's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever really done. Well, not just on a fly rod, but just fishing in general.
Yeah.
So if a person's getting into this, just don't even expect to catch anything for a few times. And then you probably are. And you might really love it. You might hate it. It's tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
That's what's fun. And if you want solitude, there you go. You are not going to encounter very many night fishermen.
For sure.
I like it.
Josh, one last word of wisdom.
Sleep less, fish more.
There you go.
Craig, darling.
I know it.
One piece of advice for you.
It's especially pertinent with night fishing.
It is very pertinent.
You must accept less sleep.
Yeah.
All right, there it is. A Troutbitten introduction to night fishing for trout. So we wade into the darkness for the experience, because it's nothing like anything else that we do with a fishing rod. In fact, how we fish at night is often the polar opposite of the things we do all day long. Downstream instead of up. Fishing the bank instead of the middle. Bigger flies, thicker line, shorter leaders, larger trout, and quick, powerful fights are standard fare. We learn to prepare for the unexpected, and we hold on tight when it happens. The mystery deepens with each trout and with each failure. We quickly realize the night game is an unwritten book, with just a few clues and an infinite room for learning new things. Each exhilarating hit and every trout in the net is a unique reward, because night fishing requires that you assemble the puzzle yourself. Ambition, then, is the fundamental characteristic of every good night fisher. All right, keep in mind, this introductory podcast is well supported by the Night Fishing for Trout category on the website. I started this episode with an excerpt from a Troutbitten article, and I'll finish with this one from a favorite piece titled Back in Black, The Night Shift. Night fishing requires some sacrifice. high catch rates are exchanged for a few fish large enough to fill out the net. It's a hopeful bargain. Visual excitement is traded for the adrenaline rush, sustained by roaming among the unseen. And sleepless hours are swapped for calm, reclusive minutes apart from the otherwise resting world. River hours pass unusually in the darkness. Time moves as if accelerated, and by early morning, an angler might wonder if he dreamed a portion of the adventure. In the end, all sacrifices are reckoned, and every night fisher estimates his worth with heavy eyes behind the headlights, wheels turning, confronting loneliness between the painted lines. Thanks for listening, everyone. Trevor, will you read us out?
Remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 800 articles with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, currently featuring the Troutbitten Tips series in collaborations with Wilds Media. These are short, useful, and unique tips for your fly fishing life. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment, because it really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the night, and find your life on the water.
Are you guys scared out there?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes, I'm very scared.
Yeah, I'm afraid.
that right there. That's good night water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
I actually do that.
Yeah.
It was too spooky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
I like it.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was spooky.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go back up and do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
That was weird.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Uh-huh.
Ooh, it's unsettling.
Man, it felt huge.
Yeah.
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 Yeah.